I stood in front of the mirror inside the bridal salon and barely recognized the woman looking back at me. The white lace bodice fit my body like it had been made just for me, hugging every curve just right. Behind me, the long train stretched across the shiny floor, flowing out like fresh snow, and for a brief second, I felt like the princess I used to imagine myself being someday. My mother appeared in the mirror over my shoulder, her hands warm as she gently adjusted my veil. "Claire, you look exactly how you always pictured yourself when you were little," she whispered. There was pride in her voice, mixed with that shaky sound a mother gets when she realizes she's about to give her daughter away. I smiled, suddenly seeing myself at 10 years old again, tossing old curtains over my shoulders and announcing to anyone who'd listen that I would marry a prince one day. Back then, it was just a silly dream, the kind of fairy tale we laughed about at sleepovers. But standing there in that dress, I wanted to believe Jacob Whitfield was that prince. For 3 years, Jacob had been steady and dependable, always attentive in the ways that mattered. He never missed a holiday dinner, always showed up with flowers, and always shook my father's hand with confidence. My parents adored him. To them, he was the perfect match. And to me, he was the man who promised he would make me the happiest woman alive. As the seamstress bent down to pin the final hem, my mother reached out and clasped my hands. "Tomorrow, you'll be the most beautiful bride in Savannah," she said. Her eyes were glossy, like she wasn't just seeing the dress, but every hope and dream she'd poured into me over the years. I pressed my hands to my chest, trying to calm the pounding of my heart. I told myself it was just excitement, the rush of knowing my life was about to change forever. On the drive home, we went over the checklist one last time. Flowers delivered. Cake ready. Musicians confirmed. The restaurant set for 40 guests. My mother ticked each detail off calmly, like someone who had planned everything down to the last napkin. "And the honeymoon?" she asked, flashing a teasing smile. I laughed. Jacob had insisted on keeping that part a surprise. He'd promised something unforgettable, and I held on to that word like it meant everything. By all accounts, everything was perfect. The whole town was already buzzing about the wedding, about how the Mitchells and the Whitfields were finally becoming one family. But as I watched the familiar streets pass by outside the car window, a small ripple of unease stirred inside me. Nothing had gone wrong. Not once in months of planning. And still my hands wouldn't stop trembling. "Too perfect," a quiet voice in my head whispered. "Too smooth to be real." I shook the thought away fast and forced a laugh. "All brides get nervous," I said out loud, even as a cold flicker settled deep in my chest. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and I wanted so badly to believe that was true. Back at home, I carefully hung the gown in my closet, letting the soft silk slide through my fingers one last time before closing the door. Tomorrow, that dress would carry me down the aisle. My mother was already in my room, folding fresh linens into the cedar chest that had been waiting for me since childhood. "Claire," she said softly, "are you really ready for married life?" I laughed a little too quickly. "Mom, Jacob and I have talked about everything. We both want kids. We'll stay in his apartment until we can buy something bigger. It'll all work out." She nodded, clearly satisfied, and then reminded me of what my father had arranged. The downtown condo already signed over in my name. The new car sitting in the driveway. The savings set aside to help us start our life together. It was the kind of story families in Savannah whispered about, and I knew she mentioned it with pride. Still, hearing it all out loud made something tighten inside me. "Mom, none of that matters to me," I said as I sat on the edge of the bed. "What matters is that Jacob and I love each other." The words came easily. Too easily. And the moment they left my mouth, a quiet doubt slipped in behind them. I thought about the moments over the past year that hadn't quite added up. The times he wouldn't return my calls for hours, saying he'd been busy. The way he'd quickly tuck his phone away whenever I entered the room. The late nights out with friends, always explained away with the same excuse. And then there was the way he said, "I love you." Or rather, the way he never said it first. It was always a response, never something he offered on his own. Instead, he'd grin and call me sunshine, like pet names could stand in for real words. I shook my head, scolding myself for imagining problems where none existed. He had proposed, hadn't he? He had planned this wedding. Tomorrow he was going to stand beside me in front of God and everyone we knew. Still, that tight flutter in my chest wouldn't let go. I told myself it was normal. Every bride has doubts the night before. Maybe the shaking hands, the restless thoughts, and the cold knot in my stomach were all just part of the process. Then the phone rang, snapping me out of it. I grabbed it right away. Hello. Hey, sunshine. Jacob's voice was warm and steady, exactly what I needed. How's my bride-to-be? Did you like the dress? I closed my eyes and let the sound of him sink in. It's perfect, I said. I can't wait for tomorrow. And I can't wait to make you my wife, he said quietly. Forever, Claire. We've got forever. I smiled into the darkness, gripping the phone like it could keep me grounded. For that moment, his words were enough to calm the storm inside me. At least for a little while. After we hung up, I couldn't sit still. Jacob had sounded so gentle and reassuring that all I wanted was to see him, to share the happiness building inside me. Just half an hour, I told my mother as I slipped on a light coat. The Savannah evening was warm and sweet, filled with the smell of honeysuckle and a hint of salty marsh air. My heels tapped against the sidewalk as I cut through the familiar park. Neighbors called out congratulations for tomorrow, and I waved back, smiling like the luckiest woman alive. His building came into view, the bricks still bright from a recent paint job. A sleepy cat was curled up in the downstairs window. I took the steps two at a time, my heart racing now from excitement, not fear. I raised my hand to knock. That's when I heard Jacob's voice through the thin wooden door. Mom, stop worrying. Everything's going to be fine. Froze. His tone was calm and confident, the same voice he used when he needed to convince someone. Then his mother spoke, her voice shaking. Jacob, are you sure about this? About Claire? I waited for him to object right away, for him to say my name with certainty, to claim me. Instead, he let out a low, careless chuckle. I've told you 100 times, he said. Claire is like a sister to me. I've just gotten used to her over the years. She's a nice girl. The word hit me like a blade. Sister. My chest tightened, but I didn't move. I stayed frozen there, clinging to the hope that he'd stop himself, that he'd correct what he'd just said. But do you love her? His mother asked, pressing the question. Jacob laughed, loud and open, and the sound turned my blood to ice. Love, Mom, is for storybooks, he said. Real life is about thinking things through. You've seen what her parents are giving us. The downtown condo, car, the money, her father's pull at City Hall. That kind of security is priceless. My knees went weak as his words kept coming. This marriage isn't about romance, he continued. It's about stability. The world tilted. I grabbed the banister, the wood biting into my palm as I fought to stay upright. Every gentle smile, every soft promise, every time he'd brushed my hair away from my face shattered in my mind like cheap glass. Then his father spoke, calm and approving. She'll make a fine wife. Polite, respectable, from a good family. You're doing the smart thing. What Jacob said next broke whatever strength I had left. Besides, Samantha Brooks is back in town. You remember her, right? We were happy once. With her I get passion. With Claire I get stability. Best of both worlds. Samantha. The name thundered in my ears. I remembered her vaguely, dark hair, a little older than us, the kind of girl everyone noticed in high school. She'd been gone for years, and now she was back, slipping neatly into the space where my heart had been. Jacob's voice dropped lower, more intimate, but I could still hear every word through the door. I'm meeting her tomorrow morning before the ceremony. Just to settle things. That was it. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. I turned and fled down the stairwell, my heels echoing too loudly against the steps. Tears blurred my vision, my breath coming in sharp, shallow pulls. 3 years of trust. 3 years of dreams built on sand. Mr. Security. Samantha. The words pounded against my skull. By the time I burst into the cool night air, the truth had already taken root. Jacob had never loved me. Not once. Every moment we shared had been carefully calculated, and my fairy tale had ended right there on his doorstep. I don't remember how I made it back across town. One moment I was standing outside his door, my heart in pieces. The next, I was stumbling into my bedroom, the soft glow of my wedding dress spilling from the half-open closet like a cruel reminder of what tomorrow was supposed to be. My mother asked if I was all right, her voice gentle with concern. I forced a smile, muttered something about being tired, and slipped past her before she could notice how badly my hands were shaking. The house was quiet, but inside me everything was falling apart. I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling as the last 3 years replayed in sharp, unforgiving detail. The way Jacob had rushed to introduce me to his parents. Had that been love or strategy? The questions he'd asked about my father's job. His thinly disguised interest in the apartment, the savings, the car. The way he never said, "I love you" first, letting me offer the words so he could repeat them back with a smile that now felt rehearsed. How had I missed it all? I'd built castles out of sand and convinced myself they were solid stone. For hours, I lay there trapped between two unbearable choices. I could stay silent, marry him, and protect my family's reputation. The guests would smile. The photos would hang on our walls. My parents would hold their heads high in Savannah society. But I would know the truth. I would wake up every morning beside a man who measured my worth like numbers on a page, who whispered desire to another woman while telling me I was like a sister. The other choice was just as painful. Walking away. Shattering my parents' hearts. Wasting months of planning. Bringing shame to the Mitchell name in front of the entire town. My mother's proud smile in the bridal salon. My father's careful preparations. All of it undone because of me. Near midnight, I dragged myself to the mirror. The woman staring back was pale, her eyes swollen, her lips trembling. I looked less like a bride and more like a ghost. And yet, beneath the wreckage, something flickered. A stubborn spark that whispered I was worth more than a deal struck in the dark. By 4 a.m, I couldn't lie there anymore. I opened the closet and touched the wedding dress one last time, then turned away. I pulled out a small travel bag and packed only what truly mattered. My passport. Some cash. The envelope I'd saved for the honeymoon. My hands shook as I wrote a note. "Mom, Dad, please forgive me. I can't explain everything right now, but I can't go through with this wedding. Love you, Blair." As dawn crept in, I placed the note on my pillow and stood in the doorway of my childhood room for a long moment. My heart was breaking, but beneath the pain, a fragile strength was beginning to rise. I could not marry Jacob Whitfield. I would not. The sky was still bruised with night when I slipped out the front door. My shoes barely made a sound on the porch steps as I carried the small travel bag, which felt heavier with every step. Behind me, the house slept quietly. My parents were dreaming of a daughter walking down the aisle, not one slipping away before sunrise. Savannah's streets were nearly empty. A milk truck rumbled past, and somewhere nearby, a church bell chimed 6. I kept my eyes forward, gripping my bag like it was the only thing holding me together. The bus station smelled of diesel fuel and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I approached the counter. "1 ticket to Atlanta," I said, my voice unsteady. The cashier didn't ask questions. She slid the ticket across the counter. "Departure at 8 a.m. 2 hours away. Enough time for Jacob to meet Samantha at their old spot. Enough time for my parents to find the note on my pillow." The thought made my stomach twist. I stepped outside, searching for a quiet corner. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and dialed Hannah. She answered groggy, her voice thick with sleep. "Claire. What on earth?" "There's no wedding," I cut in. "Hannah, please listen. Tell my parents I'm safe, but I can't marry Jacob." There was a stunned silence. "Claire, what are you talking about? Did something happen?" "I can't explain right now." Just make sure they know I'm alive, I said quietly. My throat tightened. I'm sorry. I have to go. I ended the call before Hannah could trap me with more questions. Guilt washed over me in heavy waves. I pictured my mother's tears, my father's anger, and the humiliation they'd face when guests arrived to an empty altar. My parents had given me everything my whole life, and this was how I repaid them, by running, by shattering the day they had planned so carefully. But another voice rose up inside me, firmer and steadier than the guilt. How could I stay? How could I promise forever to a man who loved someone else, who saw me as nothing more than a transaction? Marrying Jacob would have been the real betrayal, not only of myself, but of the values my family raised me with. When the bus doors finally opened, I stepped aboard, my chest tight with fear. The seats carried the faint smell of vinyl and dust. I slid into a window seat and rested my forehead against the glass. As Savannah faded behind me, my reflection stared back, a runaway bride with no plan beyond the next step. I was afraid of being broke, afraid of being alone, afraid of disappearing into a city where no one knew my name. Yet underneath the fear was something stronger, almost defiant. I had chosen truth over comfort. Whatever waited for me in Atlanta, at least it would be real. The bus rumbled north, mile after mile, pulling me farther from the life I'd always known. I kept my forehead against the window, watching the low country give way to long stretches of pine forest. My phone buzzed. Hannah's name lit up the screen, and my stomach twisted before I answered. "Claire, what did you do?" she whispered, her voice frantic and hushed, like she'd stepped into a hallway to keep from being overheard. "Your parents found the note at 7 this morning. Your mom is beside herself. Your dad almost called the police until I told him you were safe." I swallowed hard, unable to picture their faces without feeling the sting of shame. "Hannah, I couldn't marry him." "I know," she said, but her voice trembled. "But the guests are arriving, Claire. They're dressed up, gifts in hand, waiting at the restaurant. Jacob's there too. He's telling everyone you're sick." He paused. "But people are whispering. The neighbors are saying you ran away." The words hit me like a blow. Ran away. That was exactly what I had done. And in Savannah, news spread faster than wildfire. By sunset, everyone would know. Hannah's voice cracked. "Your mom was crying so hard she couldn't finish a sentence. And your dad," he kept pacing, saying, "she wouldn't do this without a reason. Jacob looks pale as a ghost." He tried to laugh it off, but no one believed him. I closed my eyes, letting her words paint a scene I would never witness. Tables set with flowers and china. Musicians waiting with instruments in hand. 40 guests shifting awkwardly in their seats. My parents standing in front of them with nothing but a crumpled note. And Jacob, trapped by rumors as his perfect image began to crack. "What are they saying about me?" I asked softly. "That you got cold feet," she said. "That maybe you realized something. Some people are even saying Jacob wasn't as perfect as he seemed." Hannah let out a slow breath. "Claire, this is going to be the scandal of the year." I almost laughed. The sound caught in my throat, but I let it happen anyway. Better a scandal than a lie. The bus hissed to a stop in Atlanta, and the driver called out the station name. I grabbed my bag with shaking hands. Outside, the city loomed, wide, unfamiliar, alive with a rhythm that didn't know me or my past. By that afternoon, while Savannah fed on gossip, I was handing cash to a landlady in a faded bathrobe for a tiny room on the edge of town. Single bed. A cracked dresser. A window facing a crooked oak tree. It was nothing like the life I'd been promised, but it was mine, and it was honest. That first night in Atlanta passed in a fog of exhaustion and nerves. I lay on the narrow bed staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to traffic hum outside the window. By morning, reality settled in hard. Had no plan, no connections, no safety net. The only job I'd ever had was working in my father's office, answering phones, filing papers, a position given to me because of his name. Out here, that meant nothing. I forced myself onto the streets with a borrowed newspaper tucked under my arm, circling classifieds like someone who knew what she was doing. Every listing demanded experience I didn't have. The money I'd saved for my honeymoon suddenly felt like a fragile rope that could snap at any moment. An internet cafe caught my eye, its windows fogged from overheated computers. Inside, a college kid with headphones showed me how to search job sites and submit applications. My fingers hovered awkwardly over the keyboard as I tried to make my resume sound stronger than it really was. 3 years as an administrative assistant, under my father's name. Would anyone here take that seriously? I sent application after application, my heart racing with every click. By the 10th submission, my palms were slick with sweat. I felt like a fraud in borrowed clothes, a child pretending to be grown. 2 days later, the phone in my tiny room rang. A woman's brisk voice introduced herself from a marketing firm downtown. "We received your application. Could you come in tomorrow for an interview?" My breath caught. "Yes," I said quickly. "Of course." The next morning, I stood in front of a glass building that seemed to scrape the sky. My knees nearly buckled as I crossed the lobby, gripping the strap of my borrowed handbag. In the mirrored elevator, I caught sight of myself. Pressed blouse, hair pulled into a neat bun, makeup hiding the shadows beneath my eyes. I looked the part. Inside, fear clawed at me. The interview room was sleek and intimidating. Across the table sat a woman in a navy suit, her pen hovering over a notepad. "Tell me about your experience." My throat went dry. I talked about handling clients, organizing schedules. Half truth, half stretch, but I kept my voice steady even as my hands trembled beneath the table. When she finally nodded, her tone softened. "We'll start you on a 3-month probation. The salary is modest at first, but if you prove yourself, there's room to grow. Can you start Monday?" Relief nearly brought me to tears. "Yes," I said. "Absolutely." Walking back out into the sunlight, everything felt different. Sharper. Brighter. It wasn't a victory, not yet. But it was a beginning. Felt like my first real victory. Small and fragile but real all the same. And for the first time since I'd left Savannah, I believed I might actually make it here. The next 3 months passed in a blur of long hours and bone-deep exhaustion. During my probation, I stumbled through the early weeks convinced that every small mistake would expose me as a fraud. But slowly the panic eased. By the end of the 3rd month, my supervisor shook my hand and said, "Welcome to the team." It was the first thing in years that felt truly earned, something I'd built on my own. That hard-won sense of stability shattered the morning Jacob showed up. I had just settled into my little cubicle when the receptionist buzzed me. "There's a man here asking for you." I stepped into the hallway and froze. Jacob stood there in a neatly pressed suit, looking thinner than I remembered. He held a bouquet of white roses, my favorite. His eyes searched mine, uncertain and almost desperate. "Claire," he said softly, as if we were standing alone in a church instead of a busy office building. "I had to see you." The air rushed out of my lungs. For a split second, I was back outside his door in Savannah, listening to laughter that had split me open. But I straightened my shoulders. "How did you find me?" I asked. "Your father," he admitted. "It took weeks, but he finally told me. Please, just hear me out." We ended up in an empty conference room. He set the flowers between us like a peace offering. "I was a fool," he said. "I said things I didn't mean. I thought marriage was about stability, but when you left, I realized what I'd lost. I love you, Claire. I really do." My jaw tightened. "Stop," I said quietly. "I heard everything that night. Every word. I heard you laugh when your mother asked if you loved me. I heard you promise Samantha you'd meet her the morning of our wedding." His face drained of color. You heard that?" "Yes," I said. "And the phone call. You told her you loved her while you were planning a life with me." My voice stayed steady, even as the hurt pulsed beneath it. "So don't stand here and tell me you suddenly love me now that I walked away." He leaned forward, desperation spilling into his voice. "I was wrong. I thought I could have both. Losing you showed me the truth. I only want you." I shook my head slowly. No, Jacob. You didn't lose me because you made a mistake. You lost me because you never saw me as anything more than a convenient purchase. And I deserve better than that. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner. For the first time, I didn't see him as the man who destroyed me, but as someone small, trapped by his own choices. Later that week, I grabbed coffee with Roman from the marketing team. He didn't bring flowers or speeches. He asked how my presentation had gone. He listened when I complained about deadlines. He laughed at my nervous jokes. There were no masks with him. No games. Just honesty. Walking back to the office beside him, I realized Jacob no longer had any power over me. The past had come knocking, and I had finally closed the door. A full year passed before I returned to Savannah. My mother's birthday brought me home. The thought of going back made my chest tighten, but I knew it was time. Atlanta had become my life. My work, my friends, my small but comfortable apartment. Still, Savannah was where my parents lived, the two people who had always loved me most. When the train pulled into the station, I spotted them waiting on the platform. My mother burst into tears when she saw me, wrapping me in her arms like she was afraid I'd disappear again. My father held me longer than usual, his silence saying more than words ever could. They had forgiven me, even if the scars hadn't completely faded. That weekend, family gathered for a small celebration. Old neighbors studied me with a mix of curiosity and something else, maybe respect, for the way I'd rebuilt my life after the scandal. Their whispers didn't hurt anymore. It survived them. The next day, in a quiet cafe, I saw him. Jacob stood near the counter, holding hands with Samantha Brooks. A wedding ring glinted on her finger. They looked settled, comfortable, even happy in the way people sometimes do when they finally get what they wanted. He noticed me first. For a brief moment, tension flickered across his face. Then he managed a polite smile. "Claire," he said softly. Samantha's gaze sharpened, protective. I nodded calmly. "Jacob." "Samantha." My voice surprised me with its steadiness. After an awkward pause, he introduced her as his wife. She extended her hand, and I took it. "Congratulations," I said. "I truly hope you're happy." The words weren't forced. To my surprise, I meant them. The bitterness I once carried had faded into something quieter. Acceptance. What we'd shared was finished. A closed chapter that no longer shaped my future. As we went our separate ways, I stepped out into the Savannah sunlight feeling lighter than I had in years. Seeing him didn't stir anger or longing. It only confirmed what I already knew. Had let go. That evening, sitting at my parents' kitchen table with the smell of my mother's peach cobbler filling the room, I thought about the woman I'd become. I wasn't the naive girl who once measured her worth by a man's attention. I was someone who had rebuilt her life from nothing, who chose truth over comfort and integrity over illusion. Back in Atlanta, my life with Roman unfolded slowly. He never rushed me. Never pushed for promises I wasn't ready to make. We shared quiet dinners, long talks about our pasts, and even comfortable silences. His honesty was his greatest gift, and it created a foundation stronger than any dowry or social standing ever could. As the train carried me back to Atlanta after the visit, I watched the fields fade into the distance and felt a deep sense of peace. Savannah would always be part of my story, but it no longer defined me. The future was mine now, and for the first time I trusted myself to shape it. The train rolled into Atlanta as the evening sun painted the skyline gold. From my window seat, the glass towers shimmered like beacons, calling me back to the life I had built. When I stepped onto the platform, an unexpected feeling settled over me. Relief. Not just because I was back somewhere familiar, but because this city, once terrifying and unknown, was finally home. As I walked through the crowded station, my thoughts drifted back to the girl who had fled Savannah a year earlier. Shaking, gripping a single bag, convinced she was ruining everything her parents had built for her. Back then, she believed she was weak. Coward. Runaway. Standing there now, steady on my own 2 feet, I finally understood the truth. She hadn't been running from responsibility at all. She had been running toward freedom. When I reached my apartment, the key slid easily into the lock. The small living room, the second-hand couch, the kitchen that always smelled faintly of old coffee grounds. All of it carried the weight of my effort and my decisions. For the first time in my life, everything around me was mine. Not because of family connections or dowries, but because I had earned it. During my visit home, my parents had held me tight, and the guilt I'd carried for so long had finally begun to ease. They loved me, even if they hadn't understood my choices at first. They gave me roots. But I had given myself wings. That night, Roman stopped by with takeout in one hand and his familiar, easy smile on his face. He never tried to impress me with grand gestures. What he offered instead was something Jacob never could: honesty. We ate on the couch, sitting shoulder to shoulder, laughing about work and the little frustrations of the day. At one point he reached for my hand, and I didn't pull away. Not out of obligation. Not because anyone expected it. But because I wanted to. That's when it hit me how different this love was from the one I had almost trapped myself in. Roman wasn't a calculation or a transaction. He wasn't a performance. He was simply a man who chose me, and someone I chose in return. No mask. No bargains. Just us. Before going to bed, I stood at the window and watched the city lights glow against the night sky. My reflection in the glass looked calm, almost at peace. I thought about the wedding dress still hanging in my childhood closet, untouched. Once it had represented everything I believed I needed. Now it was just fabric. The real gown I wore was stitched together from my own choices, sewn with shaking hands and stubborn courage. People might still whisper that I was the bride who ran. Let them. I knew the truth. I wasn't a runaway. I was a woman who refused to live a lie. My escape hadn't been madness. It had been courage. And because of that, my future was finally real.